Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. That only felt right to start the show off that way with my beautiful vocals. No, really, I don't think I'll ever sing to you again. I'll make that promise. It only felt right to start the show that way since we are at the halfway point of the season. You guys are back on the First and Tuna podcast. I'm your host, Big Tuna himself, a.k.a. Little Swimmer, and this is your Northern California local podcast, your number one spot for all you Rams, Raiders, Niners, and Chargers fans, where we cover those teams primarily for not just the football nerd like me, because it's always fun to digest as much football as possible, but we try to focus on the noob too, try to get you guys caught up and love the game as much as we do. If you guys have not already, like and subscribe to our content below. You can also give us a follow on Instagram at tuna.deluna. And then last week we launched the blog site. I've been very excited about that. I've been putting in a lot of research, trying to do our deep dives. They've moved over there rather than video format. We had our first article go up talking about what it takes in this day and age to win MVP. What are the real characteristics outside of stats that go into that? Our next article is going to be on Byron Young. He's a rookie Rams player. He's got a fantastic story. I hate that cliche rags to riches phrase, but it really is that. Like, this dude's he's had so many setbacks at every stage of his progression from high school up to this point in his career. It is really, really fun to read about it, research about it, and now write about it. So look out for that coming along with this podcast launch. What a fun season it's been, guys. Welcome back. Like I said, we're halfway here. So this is the mid-season episode. I've got some midi awards, halfway awards, whatever the hell you guys want to call it, where I'm going to give you guys like my MVP, offensive player, the rookies, and the best story of the year so far. Kind of encapsulate, get it all wrapped up in one. So that way, if you haven't really been paying attention this season, you're at least caught up to date on who the big names are and what the big stories are too. We're gonna do that, and then we're also gonna cover each of our teams. So at the start of the episode, if you're brand new, what we do here, we talk a little bit about the rest of the NFL. I'm a Rams fan, but what are all my friends? They're also Niners, Raiders, and Chargers fans. So that's what this podcast is for. If you're a fan here in Northern California, we're covering all those teams for you. So we're gonna recap the last games, and then we're also going to get my midseason grade for how each team's done so far, what the narratives have been, have they met them, have they debunked them, and then what's the outlook going forward. So like I said, if you have not been paying attention so far this season because you've been busy, or maybe you just haven't been in the mood to watch football until this point, moving forward, you'll be caught up and you're going to know what's happening the rest of the season. We got a lot to go into this week, so let's just jump into it. We got a lot of news. Usually I speed past this section because I really want to get into each individual game for our teams, but I'd be wrong to not take my time and talk about our Raiders fans. Man, how happy are you guys? Week after week I come on the show, talking my shit, and almost out of depression for you guys, because it's like, it's been bad football for the last year and a half. You guys have not looked good. No culture. It's like an embarrassment for you guys, right? I've had my friends reach out asking, hey, what's up this week? Are we going to talk positive about the Raiders? You're damn right I am. Congratulations. Not only did the Raiders win their last game with their interim head coach, Antonio Pierce, but the reason why they have an interim coach is because they cleaned house. And they did it in dramatic fashion. If you guys have not been following on social media with some of the reports coming out of Raiders camp, but the Raiders did fire head coach Josh McDaniels. They also fired their offensive coordinator and their general manager. Manager's name is slipping my mind right now. If you haven't been following the Raiders for the last year and a half, it hasn't just been to a point where, they fired because, they weren't doing so well. They weren't winning a lot of games because they had high expectations. No, they had very moderate expectations, and they were getting worse this year than they were last year. They weren't even, I'd say, a middle-of-the-road team. A lot of Raiders fans that feel the same. They've been calling for this coach to be fired damn near since he got hired. It's been kind of an embarrassment. If I can go through kind of the bullet points of really what got to the point to get him fired, kind of list as follow. So Raiders were not only historically bad on offense in multiple categories, but their head coach alienated Derek Carr. Call it what you want. I know Raiders fans are a little bit divided on how good Derek Carr really is, but their head coach didn't have his back, alienated him, got him run out of the building. Who do they have in favor of him at the start of this next season? They drafted rookie Aiden O'Connell, who looks promising, looks cool, but you didn't have to get rid of Carr to do that. But they also bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. After a long career or multiple years with the San Francisco 49ers, Niners fans are very familiar with him. He's a decent game manager. He's not a superstar. He's not going to break your game, take it over, and win those games single-handedly for you like, Patrick Mahomes, or sometimes like a Derek Carr has proven to be able to do. Why did Josh McDaniels bring him in? He brought in a lot of guys that he was familiar with at his time in New England. Josh McDaniels, that's another thing that he has a knock on him, trying to establish the Patriot way. A lot of Bill Belichick, the Patriots head coach, a lot of his predecessors, a lot of his old assistants will go on to get head coaching jobs. And a knock on them is they try to emulate the success that they had in New England, because they won 5 or 6 Super Bowls with Tom Brady and one of the greatest dynasty in NFL history. But you can't replicate that kind of greatness. Like, it's very hard to do. And these guys go into a team like the Raiders and just try to force their new culture down those players' throats and not create it naturally. You're going to end up in a situation like this where your team hates you. And now I'm not just giving my opinion that this team hated Josh McDaniels. It's been reported coming out of the Raiders camp that on his way out, it was done in spectacular fashion. So in the middle of the week after them losing to the Lions 2 weeks ago, Raiders have a coming to Jesus meeting. They have a full team meeting where they have an airing of grievances. I know it sounds very festivus, but they allowed player by player, not just the captains, not just the coaches, player by player, whoever had issues, stand up, speak out, tell us how you're feeling. Let's try to fix this season right here, right now. That did not go the way Josh McDaniels thought. I don't know if he's playing 4D chess and he thought, hey, hell, I'm gonna hear what these guys want and I'm gonna be a player coach now, and they're gonna help me help them. Nah, they went in on him. Obviously, we don't know exactly what they said line by line, but you can only imagine, just based on subtle frustrations and explicit frustrations that have been shown by Raiders towards Josh McDaniels post-game, that they went in on him in a closed-door meeting. It's been kind of alluded to as well on the Pat McAfee show by Jay Glazer and by Max Crosby as well. Honestly, I like to imagine that they told him a lot of mean things, like not even football related. Like, dude, I fucking hate the way you dress. Like, how you dress upsets me the moment I walk into the building. Like, I like to imagine they roasted him about his visor. Like, I don't know who still wears a visor these days anymore, but he does. And I like to imagine they roasted him for it. They went in on him because at the end of the day, he had his job, right? He's still the coach. The very next day after that, he's fired. So kind of imagine that feeling. Imagine that you've been going to work for the last 2 years and you hate your manager, you hate your his co-manager, and you kind of express some frustrations. You finally yell at him, and then the owner fires him the next day. That's got to feel so good, and it's been visible in the pregame. You had some videos coming out of the Raiders locker room. Them extremely excited. It looked like they were having fun. Like, they were partying just after practice. Interim head coach, former NFL player Antonio Pierce. I'm rooting for the guy just because we share a common name, or we share a similar name, a very uncommon name in Pierce. So, rooting for you, AP. Seems to be a player coach through and through. And when you hear that cliche phrase, oh, he's a player's coach, probably means like he puts the players first, really goes out of his way to put their needs before just the overall teams, in a good way. Like, it's not a corporate feeling when you walk into that building. Probably a very different culture they starting to build there, which is desperately needed by the Raiders. Bravo to the organization for not just riding out this poor coaching staff through the rest of the year just because they're paying him a lot of money. I mean, honestly, bravo to them. This is a great positive move, and I see it working for them moving forward into the future. Other news, the Rams did sign Carson Wentz. It's a very, very interesting quarterback triangle that's happening. Not to be long-winded and do a deep dive. Could be room for a good article on this. Back in 2016, Rams draft Jared Goff over Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz goes to the Philadelphia Eagles and wins a Super Bowl. They're both kind of tied together and see who could have a better career. Goff goes on and kind of has a downward spiral, moves on to the Colts, does okay, moves on to the Commanders, does okay-ish. He's been a free agent this season. Jared Goff, quarterback for the Rams for multiple years, traded to the Lions in the Matthew Stafford trade. He's doing extremely well. Now, the reason why it makes it even more interesting is because Wentz's upside is not that of Brett Rippon. If you guys missed what happened in the Rams game, he didn't miss much. Brett Rippon, the backup quarterback at the time, as of this like 2 days ago, because he got cut. That's how poorly he did. His performance looked about as well as it could go if they pulled me off the couch to go take snaps for the Rams. He fumbled twice at one play. I think if you listen very, very closely to this podcast, I think you can still hear him fumbling to this day. They cut him. Bring in Carson Wentz, because now you have a competent NFL quarterback who can play good football. His upside is that of a starter potentially, and since Matthew Stafford is very questionable on how fast he can come back and play, now you don't feel the need to rush him. If he performs well, kind of like Baker Mayfield did for the Rams last year, if he ends up staying on in the offseason. Matthew Stafford gets hurt a lot. It'd be nice to know that this offense isn't just going to take a complete shit just because our starting quarterback isn't there. It's been a bane in the side of Rams fans, like knowing we've never really had a good backup quarterback for a long time. So, very interested to see how that goes. All right, moving on. Not really in our wheelhouse of our 4 teams that we typically cover, but the story was way too good not to at least talk about a little bit. This guy is a candidate for one of my midseason awards. I added a category specifically for him. I already thought his story was incredible back to week 1. He was playing on an NFC West team, got traded to the Minnesota Vikings earlier this week, or late last week, apologies. Ended up playing for the Vikings because he got brought in just to be a third string. Their starter went out as well. The backup was playing. The backup gets hurt in the first quarter with a concussion. Hey, we know you just got here 3 days ago, Joshua Dobbs. Now go play and win this game for us. What that guy did is nothing short of incredible. I don't know many people that have been able to do that. Not only did he come in and have to play and play extremely well, he led a game-winning drive. And if you're watching any of the social media content on this from the NFL, this guy was literally learning with his linemen on the sideline during the game, the snap cadence, learning some of their names. Yes, I said that, learning some of their names. He doesn't know all these guys. And on top of that, if you're unfamiliar with how play calling works in the NFL, quarterbacks are going to have a headset inside their helmet, and the coach is going to translate the play into their headset before it be played. So the coach is having, in this case, Kevin O'Connell is having to tell him to play. Dobbs is having to tell the team to play. And then quickly, before the microphone cuts out, he's having to quickly just run through what the play even is to Josh Dobbs. It's crazy. It's something that you don't really see ever, and it should be celebrated. I hope the guy gets as much recognition and gets a potential starting spot next year, because he definitely deserves it. Woohoo! Alrighty, let's get into the fun part. In place of where we normally would do our noob lesson of the week, we're going to bypass that for 1 week. We're going to focus on these midseason awards, the halfway awards, the middies, whatever you want to call it. These are just guys that I think, if the season ended today, who's winning each award? Who stood out? We've got MVP, Offensive and Defensive Players of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and then, so I'm breaking this one into 3 categories. So Rookie MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Defensive Rookie of the Year, just because I think there's so many guys that deserve consideration, and guys that I think that you should watch week in and week out. And then my last category is Tuna's Best Story. I kind of hinted at it a little, like a few minutes ago. Just something that I think that if you guys are watching football and trying to find something interesting to pay attention to narrative-wise, this is a player you really should be watching going forward. But starting at the bottom, let's get through the rookies first. I think the Defensive Rookie of the Year right now is Devin Witherspoon, defensive back for the Seattle Seahawks. Even if he's not posting up the biggest numbers, he's got a few turnovers. He makes some critical plays in every game that just wow you. You gotta have a wow factor, and Witherspoon definitely has that wow factor. He doesn't look like he plays like a rookie. He makes very veteran moves. He's extremely versatile. In the games that I've watched him play in, he's making plays that can turn the tide, that can change the momentum. That's what you want out of a defensive player, not just to make the right play all the time. Sometimes you gotta go above and beyond, take that calculated risk for that interception, for that big hit, for that turnover, that when your team needs it the most, is going to spark momentum and help the team ultimately win the game. Devin Witherspoon is crazy fun to watch in that Seahawks defense. Give him a watch. Offensive Rookie of the Year. This one's kind of no surprise. If you've been watching this show week in and week out, he gets talked about all the time. Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua. The kid is racking up crazy stats. He's set Rams rookie records for most catches, most yards already, and we're halfway through the season. He's on pace to shatter a lot more rookie records as a wide receiver, but he's a mainstay in that offense now. Cooper Kupp is obviously the king at wide receiver on the outside for LA, but having him as almost a safety blanket now, having that second option, he's shown to be a very, very consistent starter at the worst. Keep an eye on number 17 on offense, Puka Nacua. That's my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then Rookie MVP of the Year, I wanted to make this a separate category just because I think this guy transcends just a positional. I think he's a generational talent. I don't know why his draft stock took such a huge hit. I think he tested poorly on some like entrance exam, but if you put the game tape on, I thought he was the best quarterback. That's going to be C.J. Stroud for the Houston Texans. If you have not watched this guy, just Google his name, look at his stats. He's putting up overall MVP-like numbers. His last week, he put up over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and led his team down the field with less than a minute on the clock for a game-winning touchdown. The dude looked phenomenal, super fun to watch. It makes me more excited about this, and the reason why I think he transcends any position is because of the team he's on. The Houston Texans are one of those teams, along kind of with the Detroit Lions, the Cleveland Browns, that kind of get pushed to the side as like a smaller market team, not considered a perennial winner. And usually because they're missing that critical point in quarterback. They drafted the right guy. Like, they got a winner. This dude's super fun to watch. He doesn't make rookie mistakes. If you have not given the Texans any mind this season because you're thinking, oh, it's the same old Texans, they're not the same old Texans. Their game against the Buccaneers last week was proof of that. That's candidate for game of the year. If this was like the Eagles and Cowboys game, how that played out, we'd be talking about it as one of the greatest games of the decade. C.J. Stroud, I think he's going to win that rookie MVP of the year. All right, going into the offensive and defensive overall players of the year. I'll start with the offense. Kind of no surprise. If you're a big fantasy buff, you know this guy is just on track to break the single season record for receiving yards. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins, the cheetah himself, the self-proclaimed fastest player in the league. I don't really know what else to say about this guy that hasn't been said. Just kind of put on the tape. It's crazy watching how fast he is. When you see him catch the ball and just run away from defenders, like literally leave them, it doesn't seem fair. It's almost like watching a father play with his kids in the backyard, and they don't have a chance to catch them. So you just run in circles around them. Most exciting player in the league. Kind of no surprise there. Tyreek Hill is your offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year. I've got my own hot take on this one. I've been most excited to talk about this one in this segment. Max Crosby, the Condor of the Vegas Raiders. Look at his stats. The dude doesn't take plays off. He's getting double teamed like some of the favorite candidates, like a Myles Garrett, like a TJ Watt. His efficiency in pressuring quarterback is top 3. He's top 3 in sacks. He's tops in tackles amongst those guys as well. And like I said, I think the biggest factor for me is the dude doesn't take plays off. And he does that for a reason, because he knows how important his presence is on that field. Outside of, I know there's Marcus Peters on the outside. It's a veteran. I don't really know who else is on that defense. It's Max Crosby and a bunch of guys I don't know. I'm not familiar with. So the fact he's doing what he's doing, getting double teamed as much as he is, people talk about Garrett and TJ Watt is doing that, like, oh, how incredible it is to take over the game, like they can single-handedly win it. Max Crosby has been doing that. He's had game-sealing sacks. He's had a game-sealing safety, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. This guy is extremely good. If you haven't been watching him, and you're obviously sleeping on him, he's worth watching a Vegas game simply for him alone. I think he's my defensive player of the year so far. I think he makes serious noise and at least gets a top 3 vote at the end of the year. MVP, I hinted at it earlier. I think he should be given consideration. At this point in time, he is my MVP. Christian McCaffrey. He's too important to the 49ers offense. They run everything exactly through him. They go as he goes. If he's not on the field, if he's hurt, I don't think that they win a Super Bowl. Like, this team is going to live and die by him. So keeping the pieces around him are great, but ultimately they're going to go as he goes. Third, the numbers are there. Like I said, he's on track for, I think, over 25 or 26 total touchdowns. Crazy numbers. especially in this day and age where every year it seems to be we're talking about how less important the running back position is. It shows how much of a unicorn a guy like this is. Another reason why he's my MVP and not so much of a quarterback like a Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, who should get consideration. Mahomes is not playing MVP football. Right now, MVP being the most valuable player, I think I'm going to have to leave with Christian McCaffrey, even though it pains me to shed positive news towards my hated 49ers fans. But honestly, I would love to see him get serious consideration. I had my heart broken 2 years ago when Cooper Kupp he got one vote out of, I think, 50 or 60 for MVP consideration, despite his great year. I would love to see a non-quarterback get serious consideration. The last one I want to say, like I said, I want to talk about him a little bit more. This is Tuna's best story. Best dude, best feel-good of the year. Joshua Dobbs. If you have not followed him so far, right now on being on the Vikings, this is his 5th team that he's on. He got traded to the Arizona Cardinals right before week 1. So this isn't even his first at-bat of having to learn an offense on the fly and then get thrown into the fire. Cardinals were waiting for starting quarterback Kyler Murray to get off of injured reserve. They didn't like the current backup, probably for good reason after what he showed this past week. Traded for Joshua Dobbs, I think, a week or two before the season started, which is a tough ask. Like, even getting a full week or two and not a full offseason to learn an offense and even know who the hell you're playing with is tough. The guy got it done. They played good football through the first half of the season under Joshua Dobbs. They even beat the Cowboys with Joshua Dobbs, and the Cowboys are a playoff team. So he was doing great so far, right? And then he gets traded right before the deadline to the Minnesota Vikings because their starter, Kirk Cousins, goes down with a torn Achilles. He's out for the season. They're going to rely on a rookie quarterback that they have no idea what he can really do. Cool. Let's trade for Joshua Dobbs. Let's get a third guy in here who can play competent football. I told you a story a little bit earlier. That backup quarterback, Hall, gets hurt with concussion very early in that game. Hey, Josh, thanks for being here for 3 days. Get out there. You can find it very easily on Instagram, on YouTube. Videos of Dobbs on the sideline practicing getting snaps because he's never even really gotten reps with these guys in practice. Doesn't even know their names, doesn't know the cadence, doesn't know how to run the offense. Get out there and let's figure it out. This could have very easily turned into a shit show. This guy is super fucking smart enough to figure this out on the fly. How smart is he? Dude's a fucking astronaut. I think he was studying some type of astronomy, astrology, something like that at the University of Tennessee, like rocket engineering. That's how smart this guy is. So kind of no surprise he's able to figure this stuff out on the fly. Great feel-good story. Would love to see him start for the Vikings for the rest of the season. I would love to see them in the playoffs with him. It's a great redemption arc. I hope he wins some type of award at the end of the year. That's my feel-good story of the season. Joshua Dobbs. Good to have it in football, buddy, even though you're Super Bowl. All right, normally we just recap each game that our teams have played, but since we're halfway through, we're going a little bit deeper. We're going to take a snapshot of where these teams are halfway through the season, give them a grade, and look at the potential outlook moving forward, give you my predictions. Starting off with my Rams, holy fuck, did that suck. I thought the Pittsburgh loss 2 weeks ago was terrible. I didn't think it could get any worse. Then the news started coming out that Matthew Stafford had an injury. What's new? Couldn't play. Third string quarterback, technically, Brett Rippon, has to play. Like I said, looked like me coming off the couch. Played terribly, so bad that they cut him halfway through this week. Signed Carson Wentz off the couch, or probably out from hunting somewhere. Is now going to be the backup moving forward for the LA Rams. My overall grade for their season so far is representative of where they are standing in the pack. A C. A very solid C. What goes into that, though? Well, let's look at the last game. It went as horribly as it can go because of the potential narratives moving into this season. This team's super young, they're not very deep, and if they get hurt at quarterback, they're going to suck. All those things combined into one game. Going into these grades, we're going to look at the preseason narratives coming in and where these narratives stand, whether they've been proven true or they've been debunked by these teams as the season's progressed. First one is Stafford has to stay healthy. If they're healthy, they're competitive in every single game. But that's the big question. Can he stay healthy? That's dependent on his age, the fact that he has had injuries all his career. It's very common that he's on the injury list. And on top of that, the Rams have struggled with offensive line duties the last season and a half. So the big question along with that was, hey, can they block competently all season to keep their quarterback upright? If Stafford goes down, season's in the tank. Kind of appears that way. We're at a critical point where the Rams are kind of lucky to have the bye week right now. They got to have a full game with their third straight quarterback, Brett Rippon, out there. Showed he can't play football for the Rams. He's out the door. So much so that they're bringing in a complete stranger to run the backup offense moving forward behind Matthew Stafford. Ties into that narrative of, hey, if Stafford can't stay healthy, this team looks like they're tanking. Seems to be headed that way, so I'm really hoping that the cover-ups that they're doing right now at the quarterback position can work moving forward and that the team can stay competitive through the rest of the season. Second narrative is this team is super young. Like I said, I think they're the second or third youngest overall squad in the league. We've talked about this ad nauseum on the show, that they're super talented. Like, they've hit all these draft picks, Puka Nacua, Byron Young, Steve Avila, consistent starters. These guys play every single game. But the issue is they're inconsistent because they lack experience. So you're going to run into a lot of issues where the Rams' margin of error is extremely small. One mistake is multiplied bigger than, say, someone for the 49ers because they're a more experienced team. Speaking of that very, very young team, trying to get a snapshot of how good these rookies have been, though, for the Rams. Byron Young has run a Rookie of the Week award so far this year. He's top 50 in overall pressures of the quarterback. He's done extremely well filling the role of a pass rusher. His negative that I've seen so far on his rookie mistakes is really setting the edge in the run game. Puka Nacua at wide receiver. We talked about him earlier because he's my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year midway through the season. He's broken records. They never speak for themselves. He's shown to be a consistent starter. I'm very, very curious to see what his development is going to be going forward. And then last one is Steve Avila on the offensive line for the Rams. His overall grade is probably about a B-, C+. He has a lot of rookie mistakes. He doesn't whiff on blocks, but he's done a very, very good job, especially for a rookie, throwing it right away, blocking against the largest men in the fucking world. I'm very excited to see what he does. I think this guy is going to be an all-pro moving forward. I think he'll get some Pro Bowl votes this year just because he's a rookie and it's fun. But I think moving forward, he'll be an all-pro for years to come. Great picks. But speaking of young, the young secondary is really where everything struggles. They give up a lot of yards. They're a bend but don't break type of defense. And combined with Raheem Morris's defensive scheme to cover up their youthful mistakes, it makes it feel like the defense is on the field a lot in every game. Combined with the youthful mistakes on offense, it slowly you start seeing the trend here. Can't score on offense because of mistakes. Cool, defense goes out there, but they don't get a lot of turnovers, so they're out there for a fucking long time. It's a recipe for disaster when you don't have a starting quarterback. One narrative that they did debunk, though, and I'm super happy to report this one, is they're not tanking. On paper, coming into this season, another topic that we've discussed at large is the Rams don't seem like a very talented team. People didn't expect them to win many games. The 3 wins they have so far, a lot of experts were saying that that's as many wins as they're going to get throughout the rest of the season. They've gotten 3 wins halfway through the year, sitting at 3-6. They've been competitive in all but 2 of their games. The last 2, the one against the Cowboys, they got blown out by an extremely good team. And then the non-starting quarterback having game against the Packers, I don't even know what to grade that one. But they've been competitive even against the 49ers, even against the Eagles, to show that they are not tanking. They're not really fighting for a top 5 pick. I think the bringing in of Carson Wentz shows a lot of that fight. I do think this team is going to end up at 7-10, and that's my prediction for the team moving forward. I don't think this is a playoff team. If they happen to go on a run and sneak into the playoffs, it's not deserved. This first half of the season's shown that. But I think where they're at, like I said, a C grade, which is middle of the pack. Middle of the pack, to me, doesn't deserve playoff contention. And I think Byron Young will have some votes for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he'll win it. I think there's 2 other guys that probably deserve it more. But I think Byron Young is going to continue to gain more recognition as the season goes on. That's my prediction for my struggling ass Rams. Moving on next to our 49ers. When I say our, don't get it twisted. I still hate the 49ers. But I recognize that a majority of the people that watch the show probably actually are Niners fans out of my friend group. So I'm going to speak positively about you guys. And again, if I'm speaking a little bit fast, it's because we got a lot to cover and I don't want to keep you here for a whole hour. So Apologies if I talk too fast. But my midseason grade for your 49ers, A-. They are one of the top 5 best teams in the league. I'm a little bit torn on how rough to grade them for the last 3 games. Another on a 3-game losing streak. Every team kind of cools off a little bit at some point through the season. I think they're allowed a little bit of leeway because they are still learning how to play under Brock Purdy. I know he's gone on this historic tear of like just winning game after game after game. You got to remember, this guy's still kind of in rookie mode. He's still learning a lot of things, so he's going to make rookie mistakes. What I am confused by, and getting into some of these narratives on seeing what's going into this grade. First one is, we'll just talk about Brock Purdy. Is he the guy? I think he is the guy. I think it's going to be very interesting when it gets to the point of having to pay him, because does he deserve Patrick Mahomes money? Does it deserve Josh Allen money? I mean, he plays quarterback, plays on a good team, but you're paid what you're worth, I'd say, in the NFL to a good extent. It's going to be very interesting how they handle his contract, because he's playing on a very minimal, the most minimal rookie contract imaginable, since he was the last player took in that draft. His best qualities are he's smart as hell. He is athletic enough to get out of certain situations and run the ball a little bit. He'll pick up some yards. He is a top-tier game manager. He is not a Patrick Mahomes where he's going to take over, throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, or like a C.J. Stroud, as he's doing as a rookie. But this guy's going to get you 200 or 300 yards efficiently and 2 or 3 touchdowns on games where you win, and run the offense crisply. Can Shanahan get this team over the hump? Shanahan-led 49er teams have come so close multiple times. They've been to a Super Bowl under Shanahan. They've been to 3 NFC Championship games, losing 2 of them in the last 5 years. So it's always right there. It always seems to be one piece away, whether it's another playmaker for an offense. Okay, they went and got Christian McCaffrey. Then it was, okay, we need a better quarterback. They went and drafted Trey Lance. That didn't work out, but they happened to give Brock Purdy to that same draft. Well, here he is. He's starting. He seems to be the guy. Now, one thing about Shanahan that I don't think he's done well, they've done player development well. They've done personnel decisions extremely well. I haven't seen him develop a quarterback. If you look at his list of quarterbacks that he's had, obviously Jimmy Garoppolo for a majority of that time, the Trey Lance experiments, it's hard to really blame him for that just because of how weird that situation was last year. And now Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is really the first chance he has of his own drafted quarterback, develop him and grow him into a long-tenured NFL quarterback. I'm really curious to see how well he does that, especially with how irregular the Shanahan offensive system is, where it's not your typical just drop back and unload the ball 30, 40 times a game. If he can develop Brock Purdy to the best of his extent, this roster is already top down. There is zero excuse. Like, if any year the 49ers' best chance to win the Super Bowl under Shanahan, it is this year. The pieces are in play. You guys have even went out and got Chase Young right before the trade deadline, like another top tier pass rusher on that scary defense. Now, can they put the pieces together, get hot when it matters most, and finally win a fucking Super Bowl that you guys keep yelling at me about that it's going to happen? The quest for 6 has been going on for a decade and for 2.5 decades. But the biggest telltale sign of player development and decision making that kind of drives Niners fans crazy is, I have a very interesting stat, and this is not me nitpicking, but this is very telling. Shanahan is 1-31, so 1 win and 31 losses when his team is losing by at least 3 points going into the fourth quarter. Dramatic pause, because you think about it, you can't be winning at every single point in the game. So for the last few years, anytime the 49ers under Shanahan have been losing behind by at least a field goal and the fourth quarter starts, good chance you can turn off the TV because they probably lost the game. That's what the numbers show. That has to change. Not every game is going to be easy. Like, I know they were scoring at will at the start of the season, blowing teams out. As the season goes on and as the playoffs go on, you're going to play better and better teams, and the games are going to be close. Look at the Chargers. You can't keep losing 1-score games and expect to win the Super Bowl. And the final narrative heading into this season for the 49ers is the window is closing. Honestly, I kind of hinted at it. The time is now. The team is too talented. The bill does come due on that that salary cap at some point. Having guys like Fred Warner, Joey Bosa, who else is on that defense? Now Chase Young. You still got to pay Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. A lot of these guys are going to be owed money next year and then the following year. And not just little contracts, but a lot of these guys are going to ask for top 10 player in the league contracts, to where it's going to be very interesting on who they decide to keep, who may be a salary cap casualty and letting them go, or potentially trading them at the start of next season. The defense has just had some woes where they haven't been as airtight as 49ers fans are used to from last year. So I think once you see the defense figure it out, especially with the new pieces that they've added, this team is going to be extremely scary the rest of the season. My outlook for them, they've got a big game next week against the Jaguars. They go at Jacksonville. Jaguars are also a playoff team. They're hot right now. They're on a win streak. And some of their strengths match up well against 49ers. They have a very talented quarterback who is mobile and who excels in the quick, short passing game. The Niners like to blitz a lot. And what's been beating that, a la Matthew Stafford, Joseph Burrow, is reading the blitz, getting off quick passes, and just getting yards after the catch. That's what's been beating them on the defense. You're going to have another test to see if they can adjust to that. And also the Jaguars defense is extremely good, so you got to see Brock Purdy step up and take over the game a little bit more than he has usually. My predictions, though, I think ultimately Christian McCaffrey only wins Offensive Player of the Year. I know I'd love to see him win MVP. I just don't think it's going to happen. It's hard to say that in this day and age of the NFL. I think they go 12-5. And I'm torn about how they do at the end. My hater side says they make it to the Super Bowl, but after seeing what the Eagles did this last week, and they just keep pulling out wins and finding ways to win, I think you have a rematch of last season where it's San Francisco traveling to Philadelphia again, and that's the decision right there. Whoever has home field advantage ends up winning that game. And I think Philadelphia is going to have home field advantage. I think the 49ers fall short again in the NFC Championship game. Oh boy. All right. This is going to be a fun section. The witch is dead, ladies and gentlemen. Josh McDaniels, we talked about it earlier, but let's get in depth because this was the biggest narrative. Is Josh McDaniels even a competent head coach? The answer is an astounding no. What do the Raiders do about it? Fire him, fire his offensive coordinator, fire his partner in crime. I think Ziegler is his name, the general manager. Told him kick rocks. Basically, owner Mark Davis is paying him money to not coach his team. That's essentially how it goes when you fire a coach. And like I said, not only did they clean house, but on the way out, they had a full team meeting where it seems like they just had a roast fest, telling him how much each player hated him. But moving on from that point, now you're looking at, okay, what happens now? Who's going to run this team? Antonio Pierce comes in as interim head coach. He has player experience. He was born and raised as a Raiders fan, so it's a perfect fit. This dude is super happy to be in this position, and you can tell just by how he talks about them, how he interacts with his players. His players are bought in. They love this guy. It's really hard for a lot of players to not like former players as well because they understand, how they think, how they talk, and what they need on a day-to-day basis. Not only that, but historically speaking, any team that does fire their head coach that next game ends up usually high chance that they win that game. Kind of rally the troops. Everybody's momentum is up. Everybody's happier, and it shows on the field. The Raiders showed like they were a promising team. They started rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell. They took steps in the right direction of building the Raider way of a culture. They ran the ball a shit ton. Josh Jacobs had over 100 yards finally this season, and Devontae Adams was a leader on the field. He didn't seem pissed off. Even if he didn't have a huge game, doesn't matter. He's not there to have huge games. He just wants to win games, and he looked extremely happy. And on top of that, that defense flew around. I know they played the Giants. The Giants are horrible on offense, but we talk about it all the time. Just because you're playing a bad team isn't a knock on you. Now, if you go out there and you shit the bed too, that sucks. But when you're playing a bad team, you need to go out there and just put your foot on the throat, and that is exactly what the Raiders defense did. I think they sacked him 6 or 7 times, Crosby having 2 of them, and yeah, they just embarrassed the Giants. So, love to see it. I think they're going to head in this right direction. Normally, there's a little bit of a drop-off in the 2 or 3 weeks after a coach is fired, because now the interim coach has to take on a lot, and it's like, hey, this is new experience for me. There are some learning curves along the way. I think this is a little bit different. I think because he's more bought in than most interim coaches typically are. I think this dude is going to do wonders for them. I think they go on a little bit of a run here. I'll share my predictions in a minute or two. One of the other narratives headed into this, right? I don't want to just knock on the Josh McDaniels thing the whole time. Like I said, congratulations, Raiders. They made a great move doing that. Not just getting rid of him, but getting the roots out with the weed as well and getting rid of the rest of the staff. But who is this team, right? Josh McDaniels sets a precedent there that made it very confusing in that locker room. They drafted a rookie quarterback, and then they bring in a guy who is supposed to be like the immediate future in Jimmy Garoppolo, but he plays so badly. It's like, what is he even doing here? So they bench him right away. Kind of answers that question. I think they just move on with the rookie moving forward. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on this team next season. The fact that they had 2 bona fide superstars on that offense and they weren't even using them the right way in Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, it seems like finally they had an identity to where they leaned on them in the game. That's always my take, that if you've got guys who are just better than everybody else on the field, the worst thing you can do, at the very least, just fucking give them the ball over and over. If you don't know what else to do and your game plan sucks, like, fuck it, I'm going to go give it to Devontae Adams because he's just better than everybody else. We'll figure it out. And it seemed like they finally did that. They gave the ball to Josh Jacobs. They couldn't stop him. Pound the rock over and over. But helping to answer the rest of that question, Antonio Pierce gives his team identity, right? I think he understands what the Raider way means deep down to an organizational level. I think they're going to pound the rock a lot more, run the ball. Sorry, I keep using old cliches like that. This team's culture moving forward is kind of the bad boys in the NFL. That's what they're trying to bring back. They have a defensive leader in Max Crosby, and they're going to keep leaning on that guy. He fits the mold perfectly. I love seeing personalities match up with their teams perfectly. And the fact that Antonio Pierce was a Cali native growing up, he was a Raiders fan. He's born and raised in Compton, California. He bleeds for this team. And I think and I hope they don't do what they did 2 seasons ago. About 2.5 seasons ago, the Raiders got into a situation where they had an interim coach, did well, they got to the playoffs, and then they let him go. They didn't even really give him a real chance to take the job permanently. What I want to see happen is, even if he only wins 2 more games the rest of the season, you can tell when a team is playing hard and at least has a culture and identity, even if they're not translating into wins. If they look like a competent team, give this dude the job, because clearly he fits the mold. It's what the teams need. Even if he can't win the Super Bowl in the next year or 2, you got to start moving in the right direction. You don't want to go through the coaching carousel, bring in new guys, go through roster changes all over again. That's the last thing this team wants to do. Congratulations, Raiders. I think this is going to be the most improved team on the second half of the season. So much so that my outlook on this next game that they have, the Jets, on Sunday Night Football, I think they blow out the Jets. I think they put the same hurting on the Jets as they did the Giants. You're going to see a lot of Max Crosby on primetime TV. It's going to be fun to watch. And if they do that, it will reignite something in this team to where potentially they're looking at a playoff push, because they're still in it. I know they're not going to win the AFC West because the Kansas City Chiefs are there, but things can get weird. They can sneak into the playoffs of the wild card. Like I said, if he can get this team playing better, even despite missing the playoffs, give him the job. Even if they end up 8-9 and miss it, give this guy the job permanently. Don't repeat what you did in 2021. Overall grade, I'm going to give you guys a brand new grade. Like, moving forward, if we're just talking about this week, y'all get an A+. You guys are the highest rated team all season. Rest of the season was an F. That don't count. We're scratching that. From this week on, you guys have an A+ so far. You guys are the best team in the league. Congratulations. Wrapping up with our final team that we go through every single week, the little brother in LA, the Los Angeles Chargers. This was the hardest team for me to grade. Just because every time I watch them week in and week out, it's very confusing. They're one of the most talented teams on paper. They have some of the biggest superstars in the game, but they're just not consistent, and their coach makes very questionable decisions in tight games. I think overall, I got to give them a C+. It's not pretty. It's barely passing. It's not for lack of talent, and I'll tell you why. Right? They play the Jets on Monday Night Football, their last game of the week. The Jets, they have a historically great defense. So I don't want to knock the Chargers offense for not having the most yards, because just getting touchdowns against this team is difficult. Like, the Jets had a competent offense, they'd be one of the best teams in the league. So beating the Jets on Monday Night Football, despite an amazing defensive performance, only giving up that many points, the Chargers only gained 191 yards total. Justin Herbert, they're hoping for an MVP season out of him. He only had 136 yards passing. He did okay. He got sacked a shit ton as well. I think he was sacked 5 times. But Chargers defense did play great. Not only did they gave up a bunch of yards to Zach Wilson, but it's just garbage time. They ended up sacking Zach Wilson 8 times. So you love to see all that money spent on the defense come through and just shut the door on any potential comeback from the Jets that night. Overall, though, it was an ugly game. And it kind of seems to go that way with the Chargers week in and week out. I get so excited to watch them, and it's like, man, this could be game of the week. And then they go out there, it's just very confusing to me. And I think these narratives are going to kind of explain that on why I'm giving them a C+. Heading into this roster, I alluded to it, they have a talented roster, but they disappoint in one-score games. This season alone, when a game comes down to one score, whether they lost by a field goal or like at most just one touchdown, that's one score, they are 2-3 so far this season. That means in 5 games that have been decided by just a field goal, where maybe they just needed to complete one more pass, change a decision on 4th down one time, that can alter the game. They have a losing record in those. That can't happen to a playoff team. You want to be on the winning side of those. Overtime loss to the Titans, a 2-point loss to the Dolphins, a 2-touchdown loss to the Chiefs. They've already lost 3 critical games to potential playoff teams. And this seems to be a repeat for Coach Staley. We talked about him at length to where if he didn't win, some of these last few games, albeit they were ugly games, he could have been fired by this time this season. The biggest narrative going into the season as well for them is Justin Herbert and MVP. He's got MVP talent. You see flashes of it. You've seen him take over games and just will his team, even despite injuries, over the finish line, for a game-winning drive. Usually ends up being his defense, his special teams, or how even his head coach fucking up the game for him where his effort doesn't even matter. So far this season, though, if we just look at the numbers, I know we're not a big numbers-based podcast. I try to tell the story behind it, but just for context, he's 12th in the league in percentage completion. He's 12th in the league in yards. He's 9th in touchdowns. He does have a 13 touchdown to 4 interception ratio, so that's pretty positive. About 3-1 is what you want to have an MVP. But he has been sacked 20 times, which is 11th most. His quarterback rating is top 5, 66.6. Probably a scary number to have, but now that I think about it, with the highest rating being 75.3 out of Josh Allen, so he's not far removed. So he's playing well. He's, at the very least, he's near top 10 in a lot of categories. He's top half of the league. If you break it down into 32 teams with 32 quarterbacks, top half. I think he's been treated a little bit unfairly as well because of the offensive line. I know the talent's there. I don't know if it's blocking scheme. I don't know if Herbert's pre-snap decisions, how he's setting the blocking for himself. But he gets sacked a lot. And it's not even like, it goes down here or there, but they're like brutal ones. He's already hurt this season. I think it's a broken left hand. He's been playing with a cast or taped up for the last 2 or 3 games. Very similar to Matthew Stafford, where it's like, man, any game it seems like he can just get decimated. And that's not how you want to treat your MVP caliber quarterback. Would love to see him protect him a little bit more going forward. And then the final one, it all gets put together with a nice little bow on top. Coach Staley, his big pedigree was relying on defense. He's a defensive-minded head coach. They paid a lot of money for a lot of top talent on defense. Just look at the names: Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Sebastian Joseph Day, Derwin James, Kendricks, etc., etc. These guys some of them are top 5 at their position in the league. Some of them are just extremely gifted veterans that you want to build teams around. I know Khalil Mack is a little bit out of his prime, but he still had a 5-sack game, like 5 or 6 sack game against the Raiders a few weeks ago. Not anybody can do that. When you have talent like that and you guys are still losing games for your team on defense, I'm going to go back to the Dolphins game. I know they're amazing on offense, but you've seen the Dolphins lose to very, very good teams this year. Any team that has a 500 record the Dolphins have lost to, they beat the Chargers because they're not a 500 team. That's why my grade for them has been a C+, because it's like, man, they've been average consistently with flashes of showing, hey, you can do better. So right now they're at a C+. That's the best that it really shows on every Sunday. But my predictions, I'm very positive on the outlook for them. It's got to break at some point. I think the Chargers figure it out at some point. I think ultimately they end up 10-7. I think they get a wild card spot in the playoffs. I think they win the first round and they lose in the second round to the Chiefs. I think they end up meeting a division rival. I don't see them overcoming that rivalry yet. And because the Chargers have done this before with a playoff winning coach, I think they fire Coach Staley no matter what at the end of the season. If he goes on a tear and they win almost all their games here in the second half, I don't think it's enough to justify. I think the only way he can save his job is winning a Super Bowl, which I just don't think is going to happen this year for them. So a little bit of positivity to end off on our final team segment. C+ so far. You guys are going to make the playoffs. Just want to see them not get Herbert killed, because I would love to see him win an MVP at some point, but that's what I got for you Chargers fans. I'm sorry. I hope you guys got a good snapshot for where these teams are at right now. If you haven't been paying attention to the season, this is going to be a really good kind of recap on what's happening right now for every team, so that way going forward, you're all caught up. But I'm really excited to see what happens, man. I got a random anecdote. Like, I had a dream last night. Like, this is how much of a football nerd I am. Like, I had a dream. So with the Carson Wentz signing for the Rams, right? There's a universe somehow, some way. The Rams and Niners have to play Week 18 in Santa Clara. There's a reality to where the Rams can impact the playoff outcome for the 49ers. Kind of like a butterfly effect, right? I could see Stafford getting hurt again to where Wentz has to play important games for the Rams. I don't think the Rams make the playoffs. I already talked about that. But going into Week 18, I think the Niners, because they've lost some of these games, I think they're going to be tied or something with someone like the Eagles for the number 1 seeding, or maybe number 2 seeding. Something that's going to give them home field advantage, right? Behind Carson Wentz, there's a reality where the Rams beat the Niners on the road in Santa Clara and fucks up the 49ers seeding to the point where now they have to go on the road in the playoffs. I think they breeze through the first round because they'll play a weaker team. They'll play at home that game. But that second round or that third round, they're going to play a team with a better seeding than them. And who do I think they're going to meet? I think it's going to be the Detroit Lions. I think because of the Rams playing Carson Wentz, beating the Niners in Week 18, forcing the 49ers to drop in seeding in the playoffs, they have to go on the road to, I think, the one place no one wants to play in the playoffs this season in the NFC. Detroit has never had a home playoff game in however many decades. You're going to have the entire city of Detroit, the entire state of Michigan at that game wanting blood. And I think that is going to be the most hostile place anyone can play through. If the road to the Super Bowl has to go through Detroit, that's a scary fucking place to go. And the reason why I think it's so funny is because of the trade that the Rams did 2 years ago, swapping quarterbacks with the Lions, to where now the Rams ex-quarterback Jared Goff is on the Lions. To have it kind of come full circle to where the Rams won their Super Bowl with Stafford, like, okay, cool, we got our ring, to now to where it could potentially happen for Detroit and the Rams former quarterback, to where like both sides win that trade and both knock off the 49ers in the playoffs in a really, really weird butterfly effect kind of way. Yeah, I like that kind of happened to me in a dream last night. I was like, I gotta say this on a podcast in case something like that happens. I want to have evidence that I said it. So that's my prediction. Thank you, everybody who's been liking, subscribing, giving me support, giving me shout outs. Thank you to Core Doggy as well for the art again, spicing up these videos every single week. Love you for that. If you guys have not, like I said, a big thing that I really want to push you guys towards, follow the blog, tunapod at .wordpress.com. I think it's in the link in the description below. We reached the end of the show, so if you guys don't care about conclusions, feel free to just turn the podcast off now. I love you guys no matter what. For those of you that have stuck with us through the season, we're 9 weeks in, halfway through, and you guys have been listening, following, subscribing, giving me feedback. I love each and every one of you guys. If you have not, say something nice to somebody you love today. Follow the podcast, the articles. We have a new one come out again. It's about Byron Young. So, love you guys. And for First and Tuna, bye.